The Canadian Parliament was rarely a serene place, but on the chilly February morning that the scandal erupted, the atmosphere carried a particularly biting tension. Greg Fergus, the newly appointed Speaker of the House, took his seat, his expression a mask of determination. A few murmurs rippled through the chamber as the members of Parliament settled into their places, anticipating a heated debate over the allegations swirling around Randy Boissonnault, the employment minister, and the explosive accusations of identity fraud. Michelle Rempel-Garner, a Conservative MP with a reputation for fiery rhetoric and unflinching determination, rose to speak. Her words were sharp, calculated, and laden with evidence. Claims that Boissonnault had falsely declared Indigenous heritage to gain government contracts for his business, claims bolstered by reports and quotes from a Cree lawyer. She was not mincing words, she was laying the groundwork for a confrontation that would define the day. Fergus, seated above the fray, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. The murmurs grew louder, turning into audible gasps and murmured denials from the Liberal benches. Garner's accusations landed like a thunderclap, shaking the carefully curated facade of decorum. Yet, instead of allowing the allegations to spur a proper inquiry or debate, Fergus called for silence. "The honourable member will retract her statement," he demanded. Garner did not waver. "Mr. Speaker, I was quoting an Indigenous source, reporting facts that demand answers from this government. Retracting would be a disservice to the truth." The chamber erupted. Liberal MPs rose to their feet in protest, their voices drowning out those attempting to support Garner. Fergus, his patience visibly fraying, banged the gavel. "Order! If the honourable member refuses to comply, I will have no choice but to act under Standing Order 11. She stood firm, her defiance a stark contrast to the unease spreading across the chamber. The Speaker had her expelled for the day, citing disrespect for the authority of the chair. Her removal was the spark that ignited the firestorm. In the hours and days that followed, opposition MPs rallied around Garner, with Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, leading the charge. He accused Fergus of abandoning neutrality, of serving as a shield for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his embattled ministers. "This is not about parliamentary decorum," Poilievre declared. "This is about silencing those who dare to question the integrity of a government mired in scandal." The government, however, stood firmly behind Fergus and Boissonnault. Trudeau, with his trademark polished demeanour, dismissed the controversy as partisan gamesmanship. "The employment minister has my full confidence," he told reporters, sidestepping questions about the allegations. His refusal to address the specifics only deepened the divide. Amid the political chaos, another controversy emerged. Conservative MP Michael Barrett, known for his acerbic wit, referred to Boissonnault as Cocaine Randy during a particularly heated exchange. Barrett later characterized the comment as a joke, a moment of levity in an otherwise tense debate. Fergus was not amused. He demanded an immediate retraction, and when Barrett refused, the Speaker expelled him from the chamber as well. The sequence of events left Canadians questioning the Speaker's impartiality. Social media platforms lit up with debates over the Speaker's decisions, Trudeau's unwavering defense of his allies, and the broader implications for Canadian democracy. Was this a government using parliamentary rules to stifle dissent, or was it simply an attempt to maintain decorum in an increasingly polarized environment? For Trudeau's critics, the answer was clear. They pointed to a pattern of behavior, a government more interested in protecting its image than addressing serious allegations. This was not the first time Trudeau's leadership had been called into question. From ethics violations to allegations of favoritism, his tenure had been a series of scandals that seemed to chip away at the trust Canadians once placed in him. The allegations against Boissonnault were particularly damaging. At their core, they raised questions about the exploitation of Indigenous identity, a deeply sensitive issue in Canada. Indigenous leaders and community members voiced their frustration, demanding a thorough investigation. For them, this was not just a political scandal, it was a betrayal of their culture and history. Trudeau's defense of Boissonnault, however, remained steadfast. He praised the minister's work and dismissed the allegations as politically motivated attacks. His response, while expected, did little to quell the growing public outcry. As the days turned into weeks, the scandal showed no signs of abating. Fergus's decisions, Poilievre's relentless criticism, and Trudeau's refusal to budge became the focal points of a political drama that consumed the nation. Behind closed doors, Liberal strategists scrambled to control the narrative, while Conservative MPs honed their message. This was not just about one minister or one speaker. This was about the integrity of Canadian democracy itself. To the average Canadian, the spectacle in Parliament felt far removed from their daily lives, yet it resonated deeply. Questions about fairness, accountability, and the role of government in upholding democratic principles struck a chord. Was this the democracy they were promised? Or was it a system increasingly manipulated by those in power to protect their own interests? The scandal soon reached international headlines. Observers from abroad marveled at the irony of a government that championed equity and fairness while facing accusations of hypocrisy and favoritism. The incident became a litmus test for Trudeau's leadership, a defining moment in his political legacy. Meanwhile, Poilievre capitalized on the situation, framing it as a clear choice for Canadians. "This government is more interested in optics than in truth," he said in a fiery speech. "They'll silence anyone who dares to hold them accountable. But we won't be silenced. Not now, not ever." With each passing day, the divide between the Liberals and the Conservatives deepened, leaving the nation in a state of political uncertainty. The drama unfolding in Parliament became a microcosm of the growing disillusionment many Canadians felt toward their political system. On the streets of major cities and in small-town coffee shops, conversations often circled back to the scandal, with opinions as divided as the chamber itself. Was this just another example of political theater, or did it signify something deeper, a systemic failure in how the government held itself accountable? Within Liberal circles, cracks began to show. While Trudeau's inner circle rallied behind him, whispers of discontent emerged among backbenchers and party veterans. Some questioned the wisdom of standing so firmly behind Poilievre in light of the damning allegations. Others worried about the optics of Fergus's increasingly partisan behavior. Behind closed doors, cabinet meetings became tenser, with some members advocating for a shift in strategy, perhaps a more conciliatory approach to quiet the storm. But Trudeau, ever the image-conscious leader, stood firm. Backing down, he believed, would only embolden his critics. In Conservative quarters, morale was soaring. The controversy gave Pierre Poilievre and his party a golden opportunity to solidify their message of accountability and transparency. Their rallies drew larger crowds, their social media campaigns gained traction, and their poll numbers ticked upward. Poilievre's sharp, unyielding rhetoric resonated with Canadians frustrated by what they saw as a government more interested in protecting its own than serving the public. For Michelle Rempel-Garner, the ordeal marked a turning point. Her expulsion from the House became a badge of honor among her supporters, a symbol of standing up to a government they saw as corrupt and hypocritical. Garner leaned into her role as a firebrand, giving interviews and speeches that highlighted the broader implications of the scandal. "This isn't just about me," she told one interviewer. "It's about every Canadian who has ever felt silenced, ignored, or betrayed by their government. We deserve better." The issue of Indigenous identity fraud, which lay at the heart of the allegations against Poilievre, took on a life of its own. Indigenous leaders called for reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future, demanding stricter oversight of claims to Indigenous heritage in government contracts and appointments. The scandal brought to light the broader issue of how the Canadian government handled Indigenous relations, with many arguing that systemic changes were long overdue. As the public conversation evolved, the Liberals tried to shift focus to their policy initiatives, hoping to steer attention away from the controversy. Trudeau announced new investments in infrastructure and health care, while Poilievre continued to tout his work on employment and economic recovery. But these efforts were largely overshadowed by the ongoing scandal. Every press conference, every announcement was met with questions about Poilivre's past and Fergus's impartiality. The international community, too, watched with interest. Canada, often seen as a bastion of stability and progressive governance, was now embroiled in a scandal that called its democratic integrity into question. Editorials in global newspapers highlighted the irony of Trudeau's frequent lectures on transparency and equity while his government faced allegations of hypocrisy. Diplomatic circles buzzed with speculation about the fallout, and whether it would impact Trudeau's ability to project leadership on the world stage. Meanwhile, in the House of Commons, the tension was palpable. Fergus, once seen as a steady hand in turbulent times, found himself under increasing scrutiny. Calls for his resignation grew louder, with opposition MPs accusing him of being a partisan enforcer rather than a neutral arbiter. Fergus's responses to these criticisms were measured but unconvincing to many. "My role is to maintain order and uphold the dignity of this institution," he stated during one heated session. But his actions told a different story, one that reinforced the perception of bias. The pressure reached a boiling point when a leaked document suggested that Trudeau's office had privately urged Fergus to take a hard line against dissenting Conservatives. The revelation was explosive, giving Poilievre and his allies fresh ammunition. "This is proof of what we've been saying all along," Poilievre declared during an impassioned address. "This government will do whatever it takes to silence criticism and protect their own. It's not about decorum, it's about control." The leaked document also emboldened some Liberal MPs who had grown weary of the relentless criticism. A handful began voicing their concerns publicly, arguing for greater transparency and accountability within their own ranks. This rare show of dissent within the party underscored the deepening divide and raised questions about Trudeau's ability to maintain party unity. As weeks turned into months, the scandal showed no signs of abating. Public trust in the government continued to erode, with polls indicating that a majority of Canadians believed the allegations against Boissonnault warranted a full investigation. The Speaker's actions, too, were increasingly viewed as partisan, with calls for parliamentary reform gaining momentum. Grassroots movements began organizing protests, demanding greater accountability and an end to what they saw as systemic corruption. In cities across Canada, rallies drew thousands of people, many carrying signs that read "Democracy, not hypocrisy" and "Trudeau, clean up your house." The energy was palpable, a clear indication that the scandal had struck a nerve with the public. For Trudeau, the road ahead looked increasingly treacherous. The scandal had not only damaged his government's credibility but also galvanized the opposition. The Conservatives, under Poilievre's leadership, were more unified and energized than ever. The New Democrats, while critical of both major parties, also capitalized on the situation, positioning themselves as a progressive alternative to the Liberals. As Parliament reconvened after a brief recess, the atmosphere was electric. The opposition wasted no time in renewing their calls for Boissonnault's resignation and a broader investigation into the allegations. Fergus faced a no-confidence motion, a rare and dramatic move that underscored the gravity of the situation. The motion sparked a marathon debate, with MPs from all sides weighing in on the state of Canadian democracy. The motion ultimately failed, as the Liberals, with their minority government propped up by the New Democrats, managed to hold the line. But the narrow margin of victory only highlighted the precariousness of Trudeau's position. For many Canadians, the scandal had already inflicted lasting damage on their perception of the government. Whether Trudeau could recover from this political maelstrom remained an open question. In the end, the scandal was not just a test of Trudeau's leadership or Fergus's impartiality, it was a referendum on the values that Canadians held dear. Accountability, transparency, and fairness were not just abstract principles, they were the foundation of a democracy that many felt was slipping away. As the dust settled, one thing became clear: the fight for those values was far from over.